She didn't flinch, not when the heavy oak table flipped over. Not when the gun, a customized Beretta with a silencer, was leveled directly at her chest. While the rest of the restaurant screamed and dove under tables, Oliver Evans just stood there, holding a pot of fresh coffee and looking bored. The man holding the gun was Lorenzo Moretti, the capo of the New York underworld, a man who dissolved his enemies in acid before breakfast. He expected her to beg. He expected tears. Instead, she looked him dead in the eye, adjusted her apron, and whispered 5 words that would change the history of the 5 families forever. "Man, don't dare me." The rain in Brooklyn didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Sal's Corner, a relic of a diner sandwiched between a laundromat and a condemned warehouse, was practically empty. The neon sign outside buzzed with the irritating hum of a dying fly. Oliver Evans wiped down the counter for the 50th time that night. She was 24, with tired eyes that had seen too much of the foster care system and hands roughened by years of double shifts. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was looking to pay her rent, feed her cat, and maybe save enough to finish her nursing degree. But trouble has a way of finding people who stand too still. The bell above the door chimed, not with a friendly tinkle, but with a heavy, ominous clank as the door was shoved open. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. The air grew heavy, charged with static. 3 men walked in. The 2 flanking the rear were mountains of muscle in ill-fitting leather jackets, their eyes scanning the room like predators checking a perimeter. But it was the man in the middle who sucked the oxygen out of the room, Lorenzo Moretti. Even Oliver, who tried her best to ignore the local news, knew the face. Sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of burnt espresso, and a tailored suit that cost more than the building they were standing in. He didn't walk, he glided, possessing the floor he stepped on. He was the underboss of the Moretti crime family, currently engaged in a bloody turf war with the Russian Bratva that had turned South Brooklyn into a war zone. He sat at the corner booth, the one with the best view of the door and the kitchen. His bodyguards, Rocco and Silas, took the booth closest to the entrance. Oliver sighed, tucking a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. She grabbed a menu and walked over. She didn't hurry. She didn't tremble. "Menu," she said, sliding the laminated sheet onto the table. "Specials are written on the board. The cherry pie is fresh, the coffee is burnt. Your choice." Lorenzo looked up from his phone. He blinked, genuinely surprised. Usually people stuttered. Usually the manager, a sweating wreck named Gary, would come rushing out to kiss his ring. "You know who I am?" Lorenzo asked, his voice a low, smooth baritone that sounded like expensive whiskey. "I know you're sitting in my section, which means you're a customer," Oliver replied flatly. "Coffee?" Lorenzo stared at her for a long second, analyzing her. No dilated pupils, no shaking hands, just exhaustion and a hint of annoyance. "Black. And a rare steak. If it's not rare, I send it back. If I send it back, the cook loses a finger." His bodyguards chuckled darkly. Oliver didn't smile. She wrote it down on her pad. "The cook is 60-year-old Martha. If you touch her, you'll be making your own eggs. I'll bring the steak rare." She turned on her heel and walked away. Lorenzo watched her go, his eyes narrowing. In his world, fear was the currency. If someone wasn't afraid, they were either stupid or dangerous. He pulled a silver cigarette case from his pocket, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking sign directly above his head. When Oliver returned with the coffee pot, she stopped. She looked at the sign, then at Lorenzo, then at the lit cigarette. "Put it out," she said. The diner went silent. Even the buzzing neon sign seemed to hold its breath. Rocco, the larger bodyguard, stood up, his hand reaching inside his jacket. "Sit down, Rocco," Lorenzo commanded, never breaking eye contact with Oliver. He took a long drag, blowing the smoke directly into her face. "Or what? You'll call the police. I own the police precinct in this district, Dolcezza, sweetheart." Oliver didn't wave the smoke away. She stared at him, her expression hardening into something cold, something that didn't belong on the face of a diner waitress. "I won't call the police," Oliver said softly. "But that smoke triggers the fire suppression system. The sprinklers turn on. The water is brown and rusty. It will ruin that suit. It's Italian silk, isn't it? Custom weave? About $4,000? Lorenzo paused. He looked at his suit, then back at her. "You know fabrics? I know that wet silk smells like wet dog. Put it out." Lorenzo smirked, a dangerous glint in his eye. He liked this game. He stubbed the cigarette out on the pristine white saucer of his coffee cup, grinding it into the porcelain. "You have fire, waitress. I like fire. It keeps me warm." He leaned forward, dropping his voice to a whisper. "But be careful. Fire burns. And grease stains," she shot back. "Your steak will be out in 10. As she walked back to the kitchen, Lorenzo pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Find out who she is. No waitress talks to a Moretti like that unless she has insurance. The steak was rare, bloody rare, just the way he liked it. Lorenzo ate in silence, watching Oliver move. She was efficient, graceful in a utilitarian way. She ignored him completely, which infuriated him more than he cared to admit. When he finished, he signaled for the check. Oliver dropped it on the table. $24.50, she said. Lorenzo pulled out a money clip, thick with $100 bills. He peeled off 5 crisp hundreds, $500, and tossed them on the table. "Keep the change," he said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Buy yourself a personality." Oliver looked at the money, then at him. She picked up the bills. For a second, Lorenzo thought he had won. Everyone had a price. He turned to leave, satisfied that he had reasserted his dominance. "Hey!" He turned back. Oliver was standing behind him. She grabbed his hand, actually grabbed the hand of the Don of New York, and slapped the $500 into his palm. "The bill is $24.50, she said, her voice raising just enough to carry. "I'm not a stripper, and I'm not a charity case. You pay for your food. You tip 20% if the service was good. If you want to throw money around, go find a fountain." Rocco and Silas stepped forward, their faces red with rage. "You stupid B****, Rocco growled, reaching for her arm. Crack. It happened so fast, Lorenzo almost missed it. As Rocco reached for her, Oliver shifted her weight. She grabbed a heavy glass ketchup bottle from the nearest table and slammed it down onto Rocco's outstretched hand, pinning his fingers to the table. Rocco howled. "Don't touch me," Oliver hissed. Her eyes had changed. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a sharp, lethal focus. "I said, don't dare me." The silence in the diner was absolute. Rocco was clutching his hand, wheezing. Silas had drawn his gun, aiming it at Oliver's head. Lorenzo held up a hand, stopping Silas. He looked at Oliver with new eyes. That wasn't a panic reaction. That was a reflex. A trained reflex. "Who are you?" Lorenzo asked, his voice devoid of the earlier playfulness. "Waitresses don't break fingers with ketchup bottles." "I'm a waitress who wants you out of her diner," Oliver said, her chest heaving slightly. She pointed at the door. "Get out. And take your trash with you." Lorenzo stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. The air crackled with potential violence. He could have her killed right here. It would be easy. A mess, but easy. But something stopped him. Curiosity? Respect? Or the fact that for the first time in 10 years, someone looked at him and didn't see a god or a monster, but just a man who was annoying her. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Silas, put the gun away. Rocco, stop crying." Lorenzo stepped close to Oliver, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne, tobacco, and danger. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "You won this round, Oliver Evans. But nobody humiliates a Moretti and walks away. I'm going to find out what you're hiding, and when I do, you'll wish you had taken the money." He dropped a single $20 bill and a $5 bill on the counter. "The bill and the tip. Keep the change." He walked out into the rain, his coat billowing behind him. Oliver watched the taillights of his black SUV fade into the night. Her hands, finally, began to tremble. She looked down at the ketchup bottle, then at her shaking fingers. She rushed to the back door, locking it, then leaned against the cool metal of the industrial fridge. She pulled a small, battered flip phone from her apron pocket, a burner phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years. "It's me," she whispered when the line connected. "I have a problem. The Moretti family just made contact." A gravelly voice on the other end answered. "Did they recognize you?" "No," Oliver said, closing her eyes. "Not yet. But he's going to dig. And if he digs deep enough, he's going to find the graves." "Run," the voice said. "I can't run any more, Dad," Oliver said, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm tired of running. If he comes back, I'm going to have to stand my ground." "If you stand against Lorenzo Moretti," the voice warned, "you won't be standing for long." Oliver hung up. She walked back into the diner, grabbed a mop, and started cleaning up the blood from Rocco's hand. She knew he would be back. Men like Lorenzo Moretti didn't like mysteries. They liked to solve them, usually with a bullet. But Lorenzo didn't know that Oliver wasn't just a waitress. She was the only surviving daughter of the Ghost, the most feared hitman the Irish mob had ever employed. And she knew exactly how to kill a monster. The view from the 45th floor of the Moretti Tower offered a panoramic perspective of New York City, a sprawling grid of lights that Lorenzo Moretti treated as his personal chessboard. But tonight, his focus wasn't on the city. It was on a single, flimsy manila folder resting on his mahogany desk. "You're telling me," Lorenzo said, his voice dangerously quiet, "that she doesn't exist?" Leo, the Moretti family's head of intelligence, a man who could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who manufactured the needle, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Leo was sweating, despite the climate-controlled office. "I'm telling you the paper trail ends 3 years ago, boss," Leo explained, tapping the file. "Oliver Evans, Social Security number issued in Ohio, 2022. Driver's license, same year. Before that, nothing. No birth certificate, no school records, no taxes. It's a clean slate, a ghost build." Lorenzo picked up a photograph clipped to the file. It was a grainy surveillance shot of Oliver leaving the diner, looking over her shoulder. She looked small, fragile even. But he remembered the grip she'd had on Rocco's hand. He remembered the cold deadness in her eyes when she threatened to ruin his suit. A professional build, Lorenzo mused. Who creates a fake identity to work as a waitress in a dump like Sal's Corner? "Someone hiding from something worse than poverty," Leo suggested. "Or someone planted there to watch you. The Russians are getting bold, Lorenzo. Maybe she's a sleeper agent for Nikolai Volkov." Lorenzo stood up, walking to the window. The reflection of his face in the glass was hard, angular. "Nikolai hires thugs and ex-KGB sadists. He doesn't hire women who worry about fire suppression systems. No. She's something else." He buttoned his suit jacket. "Get the car." "Where are we going?" Leo asked, standing up. "The warehouse?" "No," Lorenzo smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "I'm hungry. I feel like pie. Underscore, 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 underscore. An hour later, the atmosphere inside Sal's Corner was tense. Since the incident the night before, the regulars had sensed a shift. The air felt brittle. Oliver felt it too. She had a bag packed in the locker room, cash, a Glock 19 with 2 spare magazines, and a passport under the name Sarah Jenkins. She was just pouring coffee for a trucker named Old Bill when the door opened. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The static charge returned. The temperature dropped. Lorenzo walked in alone. This was a statement. A Don never walked alone. By entering without his bodyguards, he was telling her 2 things. "I am not afraid of you, and I want to talk privately." He sat in the same booth. He wore a charcoal grey suit this time, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked less like a mob boss and more like a CEO on a jagged edge. Oliver finished pouring Bill's coffee, her hand steady, before walking over. "We're out of steak," she said before he could speak. "I'm here for the pie," Lorenzo replied, his eyes tracking her every movement. He placed his hands on the table, palms flat, and for the truth. Oliver pulled her order pad out. "Cherry or apple?" "Who is Oliver Evans?" Lorenzo asked. Oliver didn't blink. "A waitress who makes $4.50 an hour plus tips. Cherry pie is fresh." Lorenzo leaned back, studying her. "My man Leo ran your name. You were born 3 years ago in Ohio. Before that, the air. You have the reflexes of a combat specialist, the negotiation skills of a hostage-taker, and you work in a place that smells of old grease." "Why?" Oliver sighed. She put the pad away. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Mr. Moretti, you are a powerful man. You have enemies. I am a nobody. If I wanted you dead, I would have poisoned your coffee last night. I didn't. I just want to be left alone. Please, go eat at Le Bernardin. Leave me in my grease." "I can't do that," Lorenzo said softly. "I'm possessive, Oliver. When I find a mystery, I own it. And you are the most interesting puzzle I've found in years." He reached out, his fingers brushing against her wrist. His skin was warm, his touch electric. For a split second, Oliver felt a jolt that had nothing to do with fear. It was attraction, raw, dangerous attraction. She pulled her hand back as if burned. "Don't," she warned. "You don't know what you're touching." "Tell me," he challenged. "Scare me off." "I'm not the kind of girl you take home to your mother, Lorenzo. I'm the kind of girl your father hires to clean up his messes." Lorenzo's eyes widened slightly. He opened his mouth to respond, to press her on exactly what that meant, when the front window of the diner exploded. The sound wasn't a bang. It was a deafening crump, followed by the high-pitched shriek of shattering glass. "Get down!" Oliver screamed. She didn't dive under the table. She vaulted over the counter. Lorenzo, honed by years of surviving assassination attempts, flipped the heavy oak table onto its side, creating a makeshift barricade. Bullets shredded the air, tearing through the vinyl seats, exploding the ketchup bottles, and turning the neon sign into a shower of sparks. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Automatic rifle fire. Heavy caliber. AK-47S. Lorenzo pressed his back against the overturned table. "Russians!" he growled. He reached for his waistband and cursed. He had come alone. He had come unarmed to prove a point. A fatal arrogance. "Do you have a gun?" Lorenzo shouted over the roar of gunfire. Oliver was behind the counter, prone on the floor amidst broken ceramic plates and spilled coffee. "I'm a waitress!" she yelled back. "You're a liar!" Lorenzo roared. "Do you have a gun?" The front door was kicked open. Heavy boots crunched on the glass. The firing stopped, replaced by the ominous sound of tactical movement. "Moretti!" A thick Russian accent boomed through the diner. "Come out, little Italian prince. Nikolai sends his regards." Lorenzo looked around. He was pinned. No weapon. No backup. He grabbed a steak knife from the floor, a pathetic defense against assault rifles. Then he saw movement behind the counter. Oliver didn't look like a waitress anymore. She had ripped the apron off. In her hand was not a frying pan, but a matte black Sig Sauer, P226. She moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. She checked the chamber, her face a mask of absolute concentration. She caught Lorenzo's eye. She put a finger to her lips, then signaled with 2 fingers, 2 targets entering. Left flank. Lorenzo stared. She used tactical hand signals. The first Russian stepped past the booth, his rifle raised. He never saw her. Oliver popped up from behind the counter. 2 shots. Pop, pop. Double tap to the chest. The Russian dropped like a stone. The second gunman spun around, spraying bullets wildly. Oliver was already moving, sliding across the slick floor in a baseball slide. She fired upward from the ground. 1 shot. Neck. The gunman gargled and collapsed. "Move!" Oliver commanded, her voice cutting through the ringing in Lorenzo's ears. Lorenzo didn't argue. He scrambled toward the kitchen door, Oliver covering his retreat. She fired suppressive shots at the windows, keeping the remaining attackers outside at bay. They burst into the kitchen. The cook, Martha, was hiding in the walk-in freezer. "Back door," Oliver ordered. "Go!" "Who are you?" Lorenzo demanded, breathless as he followed her. "Focus, Moretti," she snapped. She kicked the back door open, scanning the alleyway. It was clear. For now, rain lashed down, mixing with the steam venting from the building. "My car is around the block," Lorenzo said. "Armored SUV." "They'll be watching it," Oliver said, scanning the rooftops. "We need to go on foot. The subway station is 3 blocks east." "I don't take the subway," Lorenzo scoffed, wiping dust from his expensive jacket. Oliver grabbed him by the lapels of his $4,000 suit and slammed him against the brick wall of the alley. The gun was still in her hand, pointed at the ground, but her eyes were the weapon now. "Listen to me, Prince," she hissed. "There are at least 6 more men out front. They are Spetsnaz-trained mercenaries on Nikolai's payroll. They don't care about your suit, your money, or your ego. You are dead weight to me right now. If you want to live, you do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" Lorenzo looked at her. Rain plastered her hair to her face. She was fierce, beautiful, and terrifying. Adrenaline surged through him, a mix of fear and an undeniable, twisted arousal. He had never met a woman who could dominate him. Until now. "Lead the way," he said. They ran. They stuck to the shadows, moving through the labyrinth of Brooklyn alleys. Oliver moved like a ghost, checking corners, silencing her footsteps. Lorenzo, surprising himself, kept up. He wasn't just a suit. He had grown up on these streets before he ruled them. They reached the subway entrance just as a black van screeched around the corner behind them. "Go! Jump the turnstile!" Oliver yelled. They vaulted the gates and sprinted down the stairs just as the train was pulling in. They squeezed through the closing doors. The train lurched forward. They were safe. The car was empty, except for a homeless man sleeping in the corner. Oliver holstered her gun at the small of her back, covering it with her oversized diner cardigan. She slumped against the metal pole, sliding down to sit on the plastic bench. Her hands, for the first time, were shaking violently, the adrenaline dump. Lorenzo stood over her, breathing hard. He looked at the woman who had just saved his life. He looked at the blood on her hands, not hers, but the Russian's. He sat down next to her. The distance between them on the bench was non-existent. "You saved me," he said. It was a statement of fact, but it carried the weight of a debt. In the Mafia, a life debt was sacred. "I saved myself," Oliver muttered, closing her eyes. "You were just in the way." "You used a Sig Sauer P-226, Lorenzo said. "Standard issue for Navy SEALs and certain specialized contract killers. You cleared the room using Krav Maga movement patterns, and you knew Nikolai's men were Spetsnaz by their tactical formation." Oliver opened her eyes. She looked tired. "I watched a lot of movies." Lorenzo laughed. He reached out and took her hand. This time she didn't pull away. Her hand was cold. His was hot. "Oliver," he said, saying her name like a prayer. "You can't go back there. You know that, right? Sal's Corner is a crime scene. The police will come, then the feds. If your identity is fake, they'll find out. If the Russians know you helped me, you're on their hit list now, too." Oliver stared at the graffiti-covered window of the subway car as it hurtled through the dark tunnel. She knew he was right. Her quiet life was over. The 20% tips, the burnt coffee, the illusion of safety. It was all gone. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. Lorenzo squeezed her hand. His grip was iron. "Yes, you do," he said. "You're coming with me." "I'm not joining your harem, Moretti," she snapped, though the bite was weaker than before. "No," Lorenzo said, his face serious. "You're not joining my harem. You're joining my war. You have skills I need. And right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and a Russian torture cell." The train slowed. "My driver will meet us at the next stop," Lorenzo said. "Come to the penthouse. Just for tonight. We regroup. We survive. Tomorrow, if you want to leave, I'll give you $1 million and a plane ticket to anywhere. Oliver looked at him. $1 million. Freedom. Or this man. This dangerous, arrogant, magnetic man who looked at her as if she were the only equal he had ever met. "One night," Oliver said. "But if you try anything, Lorenzo, remember, I know where you sleep." Lorenzo smirked, the cocky Don returning. "I'm counting on it." The elevator to the penthouse opened directly into a living room that was larger than the entire footprint of Sal's corner. The floor was Italian marble, the walls were glass, and the view of Manhattan was a billion-dollar tapestry of light. But Oliver didn't care about the view. She cared about the perimeter. As soon as the doors opened, she stepped out, sweeping the room with her eyes. "Clear, relax," Lorenzo said, loosening his tie and throwing his ruined jacket onto a leather sofa. "The building is a fortress. Private security in the lobby, biometric scanners in the elevators, and reinforced steel walls. Nikolai couldn't get in here with a tank." "The Titanic was unsinkable too," Oliver muttered, walking over to the window. She kept her body angled away from the glass, minimizing her silhouette. Old habits died hard. "Drink?" Lorenzo walked to a crystal decanter. "Water. Tap is fine." Lorenzo poured her a glass of sparkling water and a scotch for himself. He walked over to her. The adrenaline of the subway ride had faded, replaced by a heavy, throbbing tension. They were two predators in a very expensive cage. "The bathroom is down the hall to the left," Lorenzo said. "There are fresh clothes in the closet. My ex-girlfriend left some things here. You look about the same size." Oliver took the water. "Did you kill her?" Lorenzo choked on his scotch, laughing. "No. She left me for a hedge fund manager. Said I worked too late." He looked at her, his eyes darkening. "Go shower. You smell like gunpowder and subway grease." Oliver went. The bathroom was a sanctuary of white marble and gold fixtures. She stripped off her clothes, looking at herself in the massive mirror. A bruise was blooming on her hip where she'd hit the floor. But it was the old scars that drew the eye. A jagged line running down her right shoulder blade, a knife wound from a job in Budapest, a burn mark on her thigh from a botched extraction in Chicago. She stepped into the shower, letting the scalding water wash away the blood of the Russian mercenary. For a moment, she allowed herself to just be Oliver the woman, not Oliver the survivor. When she stepped out, she found a silk robe hanging on the door. It felt like liquid against her skin. She walked back out into the living room. Lorenzo was on the phone, his back to her. He was barking orders in rapid-fire Italian. He slammed the phone down as she entered. He turned, and the air left his lungs. The oversized diner uniform had hidden her figure. The silk robe did not. But his eyes didn't stay on her curves. They fixed on the scar on her shoulder, visible where the robe slipped slightly. "That's a tactical knife wound," Lorenzo said quietly. He walked closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. Serrated edge, upward thrust. Someone tried to take your arm off. Oliver pulled the robe up. "I cut his throat before he could finish the job." Lorenzo stared at her. "Who is your father, Oliver?" "I told you," she said, looking at the floor. "He's dead." "The name," Lorenzo commanded. "If we are going to fight a war together, I need to know who trained you, because that wasn't military training. That was assassin training." Oliver looked up. Her eyes were defiant. "His name was Arthur Penhaligon." Lorenzo froze. The glass of scotch in his hand stopped halfway to his mouth. "The ghost?" "Yes." Lorenzo set the glass down. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. Arthur Penhaligon, the independent, the man who killed the head of the Yakuza in a locked room in Tokyo. The man who was a myth. He stopped and looked at her with a mix of awe and horror. They found him 3 years ago, in a cabin in Ohio, burned to the ground. "They didn't find him," Oliver corrected softly. "They found a body. He died of cancer 2 days before the fire. I burned the cabin to fake my own death. I promised him I'd get out, that I'd be normal. And you became a waitress, Lorenzo said, shaking his head. The daughter of the greatest hitman in history, serving coffee. I was happy, Oliver said, her voice cracking. I was safe. You were hiding, Lorenzo corrected. He stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. But you can't hide fire, Oliver. Eventually it burns through. He leaned in. It wasn't a demand this time. It was a question. Oliver didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, the barrier between them crumbling. His lips met hers, hard, demanding, tasting of scotch and danger. She kissed him back with the same intensity she had used to clear the diner. It was a collision of two violent worlds finding a common orbit. He pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her damp hair. For a moment, there were no Russians, no guns, no past. Just the heat of him. But then, his phone rang. Lorenzo groaned, pulling away. He looked at the screen. It's Leo. I have to take this, he answered on speaker. Talk to me. Boss, Leo's voice was shaking. We have a problem. A big one. The Russians, they didn't just hit the diner. They hit the warehouse in Queens and the shipping yard in Jersey. Simultaneous strikes. They knew exactly where our crews would be. Lorenzo's face went cold. That's impossible. The rota for the shipping yard is offline. Only the inner circle knows it. There's more, Leo said. We found something on one of the dead Russians at the diner. A phone. It has a text message sent 10 minutes before you arrived. Read it, Lorenzo ordered. The lion is coming to the lamb. Alone, green light. Lorenzo's eyes met Oliver's. Someone sold you out, Oliver whispered. Who knew I was coming to the diner? Lorenzo asked the room, his voice terrifyingly calm. Just me, Leo said, and the capos, Vinny, Paulie, and Silas. Get them all here, Lorenzo commanded. Now. 30 minutes later, the living room was a tribunal. 3 men stood before Lorenzo. Vinny, a heavy-set man with a face like a bulldog, who ran the gambling operations. Paulie, a nervous, thin man who handled the unions. Silas, the bodyguard who had been at the diner the night before, nursing a bandaged arm, where a bullet had grazed him during the escape. Oliver sat in the corner, dressed in a black turtleneck and slacks Lorenzo had found for her. She didn't speak. She just watched. She was analyzing micro-expressions, sweat patterns, breathing rates. She was doing what her father had taught her. Hunting. One of you, Lorenzo said, pouring himself another drink, is a rat. The silence was deafening. Boss, I've been with you since your father's time, Vinny grunted. I'd take a bullet for you. I was at the diner, Silas protested. I almost died. And I was at home with my wife, Paulie squeaked. Lorenzo looked at Oliver. Well, you're the expert. Who is it? Oliver stood up. She walked slowly toward the line of men. She circled them like a shark. She stopped in front of Vinny. He held her gaze, angry but steady. She stopped in front of Paulie. He was shaking, but Paulie always shook. She stopped in front of Silas. Show me your phone, Oliver said. Silas scoffed. Who is this broad, boss? I don't answer to... Click. Lorenzo had his gun out, leveled at Silas's head. She speaks with my voice. Show her the phone. Silas swallowed hard. He reached into his pocket and handed over his iPhone. Oliver scrolled through it. Nothing. Clean? Too clean. She handed it back. Then she looked at his wrist. He was wearing a Rolex Daytona. Gold. Nice watch, Oliver said. New? Yeah, Silas said, sweating slightly. Got it last week. A gift to myself. Oliver turned to Lorenzo. It's not Silas. Silas let out a breath. It's Paulie, Oliver said, spinning around to face the thin man. What? Paulie shrieked. You're crazy. I'm loyal. Check his shoes, Oliver said calmly. Lorenzo frowned. His shoes? Mud, Oliver said, pointing. Red clay. Specifically the kind of clay found at the construction site next to the warehouse in Queens. The warehouse that was hit tonight. Paulie said he was home with his wife. But his shoes say he was at the site of the ambush. Paulie's face went white. He bolted. He made it 3 steps toward the elevator before Vinny tackled him. They crashed into the marble floor. Vinny dragged him back by the collar, throwing him at Lorenzo's feet. "Paulie," Lorenzo sighed, looking down at the weeping man. "Why?" "They threatened my kids," Paulie sobbed. "Nikolai. He sent me photos of them at school. He said he'd skin them alive. I had no choice, Lorenzo. I had no choice." Lorenzo looked at him with zero pity. "There is always a choice. You come to me. We protect your family. You don't sell out your blood." Lorenzo raised his gun. "Wait," Oliver said. Lorenzo paused. "He's a traitor, Oliver. The penalty is death. He's more useful alive," Oliver said. She walked over to Paulie, crouching down. "Paulie, stop crying and listen. You're going to call Nikolai." Paulie looked up, sniffing. "What?" "You're going to call him," Oliver said, a cold, ruthless smile spreading across her face. "And you're going to tell him that the hit at the diner failed, but that Lorenzo is wounded. Badly. Tell him Lorenzo is hiding at the safe house in the Bronx, the old meatpacking plant." Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "I don't have a safe house in the meatpacking plant. That place is a death trap. One way in, one way out." "Exactly," Oliver said, standing up. "We're going to invite Nikolai to a funeral. His own." Lorenzo looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt a genuine thrill. She wasn't just a partner. She was a queen. "Leo," Lorenzo barked. "Get the car. Vinny, grab the heavy hardware. We're going to the Bronx." He turned to Oliver. "And you?" "I need a weapon," Oliver said. "Something with range. And I need someone to get Martha out of the hospital and into a safe hotel." "Consider it done," Lorenzo said. He walked over to a wall panel, pressing a hidden button. The wall slid open, revealing an armory that would make a SWAT team jealous. "Pick your poison, dolcezza," Lorenzo grinned. Oliver walked past the pistols and shotguns. She reached for a sniper rifle, a Barrett .50 caliber. "That's a big gun for a little girl," Silas muttered, still recovering from the accusation. Oliver checked the scope, her movements professional and crisp. "I'm not a little girl, Silas. I'm the ghost's daughter. And tonight I'm going to remind the Russians why they used to check under their beds for my father." She turned to Lorenzo. "Let's go kill a king." The Bronx meatpacking district at 2 a.m. was a graveyard of rusted metal and forgotten dreams. The abandoned slaughterhouse, a monolith of brick and shattered glass, loomed against the stormy sky like a beast waiting to be fed. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old copper and rot. "Position!" Lorenzo's voice crackled through the earpiece. He stood in the center of the main killing floor, surrounded by catwalks and rusting hooks hanging from ceiling chains. He was alone, visible, sitting on a wooden crate in the center of a spotlight beam he had rigged up. He looked vulnerable, a wounded king waiting for the executioner. "High ground established," Oliver's voice came back, calm and detached. She was perched on a catwalk 40 feet above, nestled in the shadows of a ventilation duct. The Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle was resting on a bipod, its barrel pointing towards the massive loading bay doors. "Windage is negligible. I have eyes on the perimeter. 3 SUVs approaching. Blacked out. No plates." "Showtime," Lorenzo whispered. Down below, Paulie stood by the loading bay doors, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He held his phone up, the screen glowing against his pale, sweaty face. The doors groaned open. Headlights cut through the gloom, blindingly bright. 3 armored Cadillacs rolled into the vast, open space of the factory floor. They fanned out, creating a defensive wall. Doors opened. Men poured out. 12 of them, heavily armed, wearing tactical vests. And finally, from the center vehicle, Nikolai Volkov emerged. He was a giant of a man, built like a tank, with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He wore a long leather trench coat and held a gold-plated Desert Eagle pistol. "Lorenzo!" Nikolai bellowed, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "So, the rumors are true. You are hurt, cornered, like a rat." Nikolai looked at Paulie, Good dog, Paulie sobbed. I did it, Nikolai. I brought him. Now let my family go. Nikolai smiled, a cruel twisting of lips. I lied. Bang. Nikolai shot Paulie in the chest without even looking at him. The traitor crumbled to the concrete, dead before he hit the floor. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He stayed seated on the crate, lighting a cigarette. That was rude, Nikolai, Lorenzo called out. Good help is hard to find. You are one to talk about help, Nikolai sneered, walking forward, his men flanking him. You are alone. Your men are dead or scattered. Tonight, the Moretti family ends, and I will take New York. I'm not alone, Lorenzo said, blowing smoke into the spotlight beam. Nikolai laughed. Who? Your driver? Your lawyer? Look around you, Lorenzo. It's 12 against 1. It's not 12 against 1, Lorenzo corrected, dropping the cigarette and crushing it under his boot. It's 12 against the ghost. Lorenzo raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Thoom! The sound of the Barrett .50 caliber was not a gunshot. It was a thunderclap. The Russian standing directly to Nikolai's right simply ceased to exist from the waist up. The high-velocity round obliterated him, spraying a mist of red across the gathered men. Panic erupted. Sniper! Nikolai screamed, diving behind an engine block. Kill the lights! One of the mercenaries yelled. But Oliver was faster. Thoom! A second gunman, trying to flank left, was thrown backward 10 feet, his vest useless against the anti-material round. Thoom! The engine block of the lead SUV exploded, sending shrapnel tearing through 2 more men. Lorenzo moved. As chaos consumed the floor, he drew 2 modified 9mm pistols from his back waistband. He didn't run for cover. He ran at them. He slid under the chassis of a hanging meat hook, firing continuously. 2 Russians went down, kneecaps shattered. Lorenzo was a blur of violence, channeling every ounce of rage he had suppressed for years. High above, Oliver was a machine. She cycled the bolt of the sniper rifle with rhythmic precision. She wasn't shooting to suppress. She was shooting to clear the board. She took out the men with automatic rifles first, prioritizing the biggest threats to Lorenzo. Cover me! Lorenzo shouted into his comms. I'm going for Nikolai! Clear left, Oliver shouted back. She shifted her aim. A mercenary had popped up from behind a pillar, aiming an RPG at Lorenzo. Oliver didn't hesitate. She didn't aim for the man. She aimed for the warhead. Thoom! The RPG detonated in the mercenary's hands. The explosion rocked the building, blowing out the remaining windows and sending a shockwave that knocked Lorenzo off his feet. Dust and smoke filled the room. Lorenzo coughed, scrambling up. His ears were ringing. Oliver! Status! Static. Oliver! Nothing. Lorenzo scanned the catwalks. The explosion had collapsed part of the upper gantry. No! He growled. Suddenly a shadow loomed out of the smoke. Nikolai! The Russian giant slammed into Lorenzo like a freight train. Lorenzo's guns skittered across the floor. They crashed into a pile of old machinery. This wasn't a gunfight anymore. It was a brawl. Nikolai was stronger, heavier. He grabbed Lorenzo by the throat, lifting him off the ground and slamming him against a brick pillar. Where is your angel now? Nikolai roared, squeezing. Lorenzo clawed at Nikolai's massive hands, his vision spotting. He kicked, he punched, but it was like hitting a wall of granite. She's not an angel, Lorenzo choked out. She's a reaper. Nikolai scoffed, tightening his grip. She is dead, and you are next. Lorenzo's vision began to fade. Darkness encroached on the edges. He reached for a loose brick in the pillar, smashing it against Nikolai's face. The Russian grunted, blood pouring from his nose, but he didn't let go. He threw Lorenzo to the ground and pulled a massive combat knife from his belt. Say hello to your father, Nikolai hissed, raising the knife. Lorenzo braced himself for the end. Click! The sound came from right behind Nikolai's head. The Russian froze. Drop it, a female voice said. It was breathless, pained, but steady. Nikolai slowly turned his head. Oliver stood there. She was limping badly, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead where the catwalk had collapsed. Her sniper rifle was gone. In her hand was the Sig Sauer P226. The barrel was pressed against the back of Nikolai's skull. "You," Nikolai whispered, his eyes widening as he recognized the cold, dead look in her eyes. "You are Arthur's girl. I saw the pictures. You were supposed to be dead." "I got better," Oliver said. "Drop the knife." Nikolai laughed low in his throat. "You won't shoot. At this range, the blowback will blind you. And my men are still—" Bang. Oliver didn't monologue. She didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger. Nikolai crumpled forward, dead instantly. Oliver stood there for a second, swaying. Then her legs gave out. Lorenzo scrambled over, catching her before she hit the concrete. "Oliver!" He checked her. She was battered, covered in dust and blood, but alive. She looked up at him, wiping blood from her eyes. She gestured to the dead Russian warlord. "That," she wheezed, "was for the $20 tip." Lorenzo stared at her. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a hysterical, relieved laugh that echoed through the slaughterhouse. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her hair. "You're crazy," he whispered. "You are absolutely insane." "I know," she murmured, closing her eyes. "Let's go home." 3 months later, Sal's Corner had reopened. But it was different now. The neon sign was new. The windows were bulletproof glass, and the "Help Wanted" sign was gone. The diner was packed, but the clientele had changed. It wasn't just truckers and locals anymore. Men in sharp suits sat in the back booths, speaking in hushed tones. Oliver walked behind the counter. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored black blazer over a silk blouse, and on her finger sat a diamond ring that cost more than the entire city block. She poured coffee for a young man who looked terrified. "Relax, kid," she said, sliding a slice of cherry pie toward him. "Lorenzo will see you now." The kid nodded, swallowing hard, and walked toward the back booth where Lorenzo Moretti sat. Lorenzo looked up as Oliver approached. He looked tired, but happy. The war with the Russians was over. The territory was consolidated. And the Moretti family had never been stronger. He reached out, grabbing Oliver's hand as she walked by. He pulled her close. "You didn't have to work today," he said softly. "We have staff for this." "I like the coffee," Oliver smiled. "Besides, someone has to make sure you don't intimidate the customers too much." "I'm a gentle soul," Lorenzo grinned. "You're a mob boss," she countered. "I'm a married man," he corrected, kissing her knuckles, "which is much more dangerous." Oliver looked around the diner. She thought about the run, the fear, the years of hiding. It was all gone. She wasn't Oliver the waitress anymore. She wasn't just the ghost's daughter. She was the queen of New York. She leaned down, whispering in his ear. "Table 4. 2 guys. Bulges under their jackets. They aren't yours." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. "Feds?" "Rival family from Jersey," Oliver analyzed. "Trying to scout the territory." Lorenzo sighed. "Do you want to handle it? Or should I?" Oliver straightened up, smoothing her blazer. She picked up the fresh pot of coffee. "I'll handle it," she said. "I think they need to learn about the house rules." She walked over to table 4. The 2 men looked up, smirking at the pretty woman approaching them. "Can I get you boys anything?" Oliver asked sweetly. "Just your phone number, sweetheart," one of them leered. Oliver smiled. It was the smile of a shark, sensing blood in the water. "How about I give you a warning instead," she said, her voice dropping to that lethal whisper. "You're in Moretti territory. Drink your coffee, leave a big tip, and get out before I decide to renovate the floor with your faces." The men blinked, confused. "Who do you think you are?" "Oliver Evans." Moretti leaned in. "Man," she whispered, "don't dare me." That is the story of how a simple cup of coffee and a refusal to back down changed the underworld forever. Oliver proved that power isn't about the suit you wear or the gun you carry. It's about the fire inside you that refuses to be extinguished. She went from serving steaks to ruling the streets, reminding us all that sometimes the quietest people are the ones you should fear the most. So here is my question for you. If you were in Oliver's shoes, would you have taken the $1 million and run, or would you have stayed to fight alongside Lorenzo? Let me know your choice in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of romance, action, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.